YouTube. This is a how-to video on installing a TP-Link Kasa brand Wi-Fi switch. And a little background here, this is for a cabin, lake cabin. And in the past, 25 years ago, I had installed X10 switches there. If you're not familiar with X10, it is an old protocol that allowed you to turn off lights and things remotely. Wasn't very reliable, but it worked. And 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot of affordable options. So we have an X10 switch there. I also had some cameras inside and out of this cabin so that I could check on the place when we're not there. And that's worked fine, but it was time for some upgrades. And I've been using some Wyze little $30 cameras, the pan tilt zoom cameras, and they work really well for checking on a remote property, a vacation home. They also sell, Wyze also sells some LED bulbs, and you can control them from the same app that you control your cameras with. And I thought, well, this would be a great way to quickly get access to some lights in the cabin there. I can just turn them on and off with the Wyze app while I'm using the same Wyze app to control the cameras. And so I picked up a pack of these Wyze bulbs, and when I screwed them in, it didn't work. They wouldn't stay on, or if you got it to come on, it would flicker up and down. And it didn't take long to figure out the problem was not the bulb. The problem was the old X10 wall switch that had been there for 20 plus years. The X10 switch was not compatible with LED bulbs. It requires an incandescent type bulb load. They still make these X10 switches. You can go to x10.com and this switch is still there, same model number, $22 or so. But there's a lot better options now, so don't buy X10 switches today. So that led me into a project of I need to swap out those X10 switches with something new, and that's what this video is about. If you enjoy tech videos and how-to repair type topics, then please consider subscribing. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new video. That way you won't miss one. So the switches that I selected were these TP-Link Kasa Smart Wi-Fi dimmer switches. I selected these because you could get 3 for about $45, which compared to Z-Wave switches and some of the other options that are $40 a piece, it's much more affordable. To do this job, you really only need a couple of basic hand tools. You need a good insulated handle screwdriver, you need a pair of lineman pliers, and you need a multimeter to check for voltage. Be sure and turn the power off at the breaker before working on any kind of electrical device or wiring. Once the breaker is off, go ahead and remove the panel, remove the cover from the switches. And go ahead and remove the switches from the box. Anytime you deal with wiring, it's always good to double check. Take your meter out and check that voltage and make sure you're not going to light up your nose. Make sure there's no power there before trying to mess with the wires. Anytime you mess with these old wiring in houses like this, the wire is stiff. It's been there for years. It's been in that position for a long time. So you really have to kind of work with it. What you're looking for with these smart switches is a neutral wire. Almost all these new smart switches require a white neutral wire. If your house was built since the 80s or so, it probably has one. Now there are 4 connections to this switch. The green wire is the ground, the white wire is the neutral, that you have to wire into that white bundle that we just saw. And then of course you have the load, which is the red wire, and the line, which is the black wire. You can see the screws are color coded to kind of remind you of that connection. So 2 of the connections will be made with wire nuts, and 2 of the connections will be made underneath these screw terminals. It's always good to take your pliers and sort of tighten up that wire nut to make sure it's good and tight once you've twisted the wires together. It turns out that you really can't work with the wire with the other switch in the way. So pro tip is to take the other switch out, get it out of the way, because you're going to need to be able to access all the wires, and you're going to need to be able to compress everything back into the back of that box to get your switches back in. So rather than try to work through just the switch you're replacing, it's really easiest to give yourself some room to work. It's a little hard to see here, but if you'll notice, the old switch was connected with a wire nut to the black wire, and there's actually 2 wires already there that are connecting to the black that were coming to the old switch. That's not going to work trying to get that 2 wires under a screw, so you may have to reconfigure the wiring a little bit. And what I'll do here is take all of the black wires and join them together with 1 pigtail coming out. Join them together with a wire nut, and then the 1 pigtail coming out is the wire that I'll connect underneath the screw on the switch, because you'd never get 2 wires under that screw and make a safe connection. So join all the black wires together if you need to, or red wires or whatever you have, so that you just have 1 pigtail coming out, and that's what you connect to your switch. Okay, now I have 1 red wire, 1 black wire, and 1 ground wire to connect to the switch. That'll work. For the screw terminals, you want to bend a little loop into the end of your copper wire, and then you want to get it looped around the screw and underneath the little plate that you see here. You don't want the wire directly underneath the screw. You want the wire looped around the screw and the plate on top of the wire to hold it down and compress it into a good connection. You'll do that both for the red wire and for the black wire. So form a little loop in your copper, get it on the screw terminal, get the screw in it with the plate on top of it before you tighten it down, and that'll give you a good secure connection. Takes a little bit of finagling to get those wires and the screw and the plate all in the right place, but just take your time and line it up and then tighten it up, and it'll work correctly. And finally, you're going to connect your ground wire. And this again is a connection made with a wire nut. Now in my case, I had way too much copper sticking out here, so I trimmed off a little bit of it and left enough that I could make a good connection with my wire nut. Use your lineman pliers and twist those wires together nice and tightly, and then put a wire nut on it. Inspect your wiring before you're ready to apply the power, and then you go for the smoke test. Turn it on and see if it smokes. Hopefully, if you did everything right, you won't have any problem. You'll see the flashing green and yellow light, and you're ready for the next step. Now the next steps are done in the app. I chose to do this before finishing the installation of the switch because I wanted to make sure that it worked before I buttoned everything up. But going through the app is fairly straightforward, and it works the same with all of these smart devices. You'll select which kind of switch you're installing. You'll connect it to your Wi-Fi and let it go through its configuration process. I found that the Wi-Fi signal connected very easily. It had a good strong reception, and it would work perfectly. The nice thing about this switch is once it's in place, it will work through the app, or it'll also work with Alexa or your Google speakers, anything that you may have. Now I have sped this up to keep from boring you to tears, but the process is fairly basic, and it works the same on all these switches. You'll let it connect to your Wi-Fi network, and once it has connected, you'll give it a name, verify that it works. It also gives you the option to verify the dimming range, so you can customize the dimming capability to the bulbs that you have. So that's a really nice feature to make sure it ramps nice and smoothly. But once you've done this process once, you'll repeat it for as many switches as you have, and they all work the same, and it's fairly straightforward. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. We've confirmed that the switch works, so we're going to turn the power back off before we try to clean up the box here and dress all the wires nice and neatly into the box. And honestly, this is the hardest part of the whole installation, is getting these wires back into the box, back towards the back of the box, so the switches will fit in nice and correct. It really just takes a little bit of finagling, a little bit of patience. You may have to squish the wires back into the back of the box, use your pliers to kind of push them in. Be careful that you don't let the ground wire get across the side of the switch. Just kind of compress everything back into the back, get the switches back where they can be securely screwed in and lined up, and take your time, and it'll work. You just have to be patient and be diligent to get it all back together in the correct fashion. I had to seat the switch a couple of times to adjust it and get everything where it would fit correctly. At first it was sticking out a little too much. I had to pull it back out and compress the wires behind it a little bit more. So it's expected that you'll have to do a little tinkering with it, but just continue to work with it until you get it lined up correctly, and until it screws in flushly and everything looks appropriate. I'm not sure if flushly is a word. And finally, all our persistence has paid off, and the plate fits flush and correct. Ultimately, I'm going to replace the fan switch on the right with a white switch also, and then I'll replace the cover with a white cover so that everything matches. But for the purpose of this video, this is all I had, so it's completed as a mismatched color for now, but it works correctly, and that's what we're after. Okay, power has been reapplied, and the switch has a light on it there that shows you where it's at when it's off. That's a nice feature in a dark room. You can find the switch without stumbling around trying to find it. It also has a LED bar at the top there to show you the dimming range that the switch is set to. And now the light works correctly. It doesn't flicker. It doesn't have a struggle like it was having with the old X10 switch. So we've been successful. Not only have we been successful, but now I have way more options than I had before, because I can use the TP-Link, the Kasa app, with this light and control it from my phone, which it's a nice app. It works fine. But I can also use the Wyze app, and I can use the Wyze app to dim the bulb and change the color profile, the color temperature of the bulb, to make it a nice white or a kind of a yellow, whatever is appropriate for that room. So you have two options. I can use the Kasa app or the Wyze app. Well, that about wraps up this project. Looks like it was successful, and it's definitely a nice upgrade. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and maybe it'll help somebody out trying to do their own upgrade. If you enjoyed this video and you like these kinds of videos, please consider subscribing. I'd appreciate it. Click that bell so you'll be notified when there's new videos, and I'll look forward to showing you more projects.